It was maybe my third viewing of the Elephant's first act where I could kind of begin to give you a summary of what I just watched. Even now, there's still this part of me that's sure that as soon as I press publish on this video, somebody will manage to find a timecode where I say something inarguably wrong. And I kind of love that about it. Pendleton Ward's 7 minutes of near inscrutability kicks off with the harvesting of a mostly mechanical body, shackled by featureless beings and poked and prodded and sliced towards seemingly no end. Eventually, this nameless creature, or at least a part of them, manages to stop this process, with rapidly regenerating eyes proceeding to fall out of the sockets and one of them forming into our protagonist for the next 6 minutes. From a thematic point of view, and somewhat surprisingly, a good chunk of at least the beginning of this section is fairly straightforward. Meowmalade, a self-proclaimed secret agent in the universe, whose design is almost hilariously coherent, pretty much spells it out for both the audience and our unnamed protagonist, telling the newly formed being that they are neither good nor bad, but have the ability to become truly anything. This is backed up both by the third character of the gang, who sprouts out of our main character's severed limb, and the external game found by scanning this QR code right here, which not only repeats the same line from Meowmalade, but also literally has you fight your father's shadow before hearing it. All of this leads to what is a visually fascinating and at times stunning 5 minutes that's also somewhat thematically digestible. And then it keeps going. After continuing to run from the pursuing harvesters, Meowmalade eventually takes our protagonist to exist among their treasures of the universe, where their offspring proceeds to accessorize them, they make a comic strip to send to their alternate universe self, and then are almost immediately slaughtered. All of this happens at a breakneck pace, giving the end of our exquisite corpse's life only a few moments to be processed. But after watching it several more times, I was kind of overtaken by the beauty of it. I think there's a reason that this segment has garnered a kind of lukewarm reception, and it's because, at least for me, it was almost impossible to fully appreciate what it's going for on a first watch. How the two creatures interact in this almost kind of strangely maternal way to emphasize the connection of their origins, how the protagonist's decision to decline drawing an additional panel but instead only place a flower, a part of themselves, allows their alternate version to take the comic in truly any direction, to be anything they desire, just how they got that blessing, and how they sacrifice themselves at the end to allow the being that has sprouted from a part of them to find their eventual self as well. Everywhere I look here keeps me coming to the same idea. Act 1 of The Elephant is a reflection on what it means to be a first act, what it means to be the stage where the outcome isn't yet decided. Every character here, from the imprisoned beast at the start dropping as many eyes as possible, to Meowmalade sacrificing their home and the protagonist sacrificing themselves, everybody is trying to do everything possible to allow somebody else to become who they're going to be. It's hard to imagine a more fitting opener to the unknown. If everything has a beginning and also an end, then this was just the middle. We hear this line at, fittingly, the beginning and end of Ian Jones-Cordy and Rebecca Sugar's Act 2, and finding its connection to the rest of the section isn't exactly a staggering task. This middle act has us following a being referred to by others as Music Button, with their namesake feature capable of playing music with an ecstatic impact on anybody who hears it. This effect doesn't come on a first attempt, as it requires a few presses of failure first, but eventually music starts playing and joy starts spreading, even initially to Music Button themselves. This joy eventually ends for our protagonist, however. Even if you were to be unaware of who is behind this work of art and were to just instead make the fairly safe guess that it was indeed an artist of some kind, I think it's more than fair to assume that Music Button's struggle is indeed analogous to that of a successful artist, one who feels jubilation when others appreciate their work, but also feels stuck to their creation and immense dread when they're no longer able to create it. Some of the lines from these 7 or so minutes that have stuck with me most are the ones from Music Button's subconscious about wanting to keep making this beloved art forever, wanting to kill the curiosity that lingers deep within them and the anxiety that stops them from achieving their quote-unquote purpose, but just not being able to. Not being able to ignore the dark voice that constantly drops in during the creation process, not being able to remain content in what they describe as, quote, the center of something frighteningly grand. In the middle of one of their breakdowns amidst their success, they see somebody in the distance, somebody like them. However, before they have a chance to approach, Music Button is drawn back into their art, never getting another chance to do so. An opportunity sacrificed, a relationship never explored. As Music Button continues to follow the voice from their artistic process, they're eventually taken somewhere deep within the city, a nearly indescribable sanctuary of sorts. There, they finally manage to confront the voice, who tells them to give in to the demands of the crowd, to continue to make and to devote themselves to that alone. The mob that has formed inherently desires Music Button to do the same thing, to continue pressing their titular feature until they get what they want. They don't even seem to really be concerned with who happens to be doing the pressing. And it's that idea that ultimately gives our protagonists their way out, removing themselves from their creation and finding freedom without it. Their newfound ability to become anything they want demonstrated as they continuously transform until their very end. It's a stunning display, fitting of the sanctuary in which it takes place. If the line I started this discussion with, now coming through the button itself, didn't emphasize it enough, then I think the rest of this section makes it pretty clear that this middle act is indeed about an artist's middle act, about what they do when their creation finally makes it big and they feel stuck to it forever. Music Button's solution to this problem isn't to destroy their art or spite their fans, but to make an effort to have it no longer feel like an extension of them, and instead to simply allow their voice to ring out of it. Ultimately, it's art about art, and it's hard to imagine a more fitting interior to the unknown. Patrick McHale's Act 3 begins in a state of chaos. Even if the idea of a soul who wakes up in a different body upon death doesn't entirely excite you for some reason, the various art styles featured in the first few minutes, all of which stunning, make this feel like the climax to a story we just happen to not see. Eventually though, the wandering soul settles into the body of a newly built robot, Screeno, a being whose namesake screen rests firmly out of their own sight, set deep within their chest. Our protagonist, immediately noticing just how frankly lame this one is in design and scale, decides to flip their own kill switch and move on to the next, hopefully more fun iteration, before Dan, the scientist watching his own creation function in ways he never intended, convinces them to stop if only for a moment. What follows is a kind of twistedly beautiful version of a rom-com, Dan and our protagonist bonding over their shared experience of not being able to fully find themselves while walking through this beautiful snowy city, all while the scientist tries to convince his creation to not kill themselves. However, none of this ends up swaying our spirit, with them telling Dan that this can't be their final stop because it's so obviously imperfect, and that they need to continue cycling, making the decision to do so as soon as they get their first moment alone. This section's attempt to encapsulate what it means to be a third act, a final chapter if you will, begins to come into full light here, the soul currently resting inside Screeno deciding whether or not they want to settle down or continue moving forward towards different opportunities. Stay and try to build some type of life with Dan, or try their luck somewhere else. It initially seems like they might not get that choice at all. I think it's kind of beautiful that it's only after witnessing Dan's near-death experience that our wandering spirit is able to appreciate life rather than seizing each opportunity to end it as quickly as possible, seeing how much pain they felt when thinking that Dan's had been taken away from him. In the end, they see the value of sticking around long enough to build something, to finally build a life of their own, declaring they're not going anywhere and that this is what they want the final step of their journey to look like, their final act. It's hard to imagine a more fitting finale to the unknown. For a brief second, it seems as if the special has become entirely self-aware. 3 demonic beings, each blinded by majestic butterflies, marching together. The one ending up in the middle, having 2 heads, making what they represent more than clear. They seem to be interacting with some wicked creation together, each segment impeccably detailed but inarguably cold. Eventually, unbeknownst to them, the fog fades away and the enormous creature comes into view. The allusion to the parable of the blind men and the elephant is easy to make. Individuals unable to appreciate the totality of what they are touching, a beautifully detailed and impressively coherent creature, one who inspires this feeling of immense awe upon even the tiniest of glances. It's stunning. The kill switch doesn't function. The working of machines cannot end what has been created and what will be made in the future. Despite Skrino's mechanical inner workings, there is something inherently human about this display, something inherently human about finding the joy in whatever your final act ends up being, something that cannot be artificially replicated nor ended. It's hard to imagine a more fitting finale to the unknown that has occurred before. This has been AmpleSamuel. Thanks for watching.